What's up guys, hope you're having a good day. In this video I'm going to be explaining the reasons why I feel Justin Gaethje is a pretty good bet this weekend to beat Dustin Poirier, and of course we're also going to be breaking down all the other main card fights at UFC 291 from a betting perspective. So hopefully you'll get a lot of value out of this video. Hopefully this video will help you make better betting decisions this weekend, maybe even earn some extra cash. And if you appreciate these breakdown videos, please hit the like button below and also subscribe if you haven't already. They help push these videos to way more people, which obviously helps me out loads. So I'd really appreciate it if you guys like these videos, if you could do that. Also, if you want to sign up for live betting, we currently have some spaces available in my live betting group. So if you want to, watch the UFC, tail all my live bets, you can head on over to my website and sign up now for that. As you can see, we make a profit on live betting almost every month. We have them for the last 8 years. So if that's something you'd be interested in trying out, head on over to my website and check out my live betting tips. Got any questions, hit me up, send me an email, and if you don't like it, we'll give you a refund anyway, no problem. So now, without wasting any more time, let's dive into the main event of this card and break down the fight between Dustin Poirier and Justin Gaethje. So if you've seen the thumbnail for this video, obviously you'll know that I'm betting on Justin Gaethje this weekend. The reason why I'm betting on Justin Gaethje is not because I feel super confident that he's going to win this fight, but because I feel there are a lot more reasons to like Gaethje in this fight, a lot more reasons why he's more likely to win than Dustin Poirier. So this isn't one of those bets I feel super confident in. I just feel that his odds provide us with a really, really good risk to reward ratio. So if we start off by taking a look at the odds, you'll start to understand where I'm coming from. So if we take a look at the odds, we can see that Dustin Poirier is the favourite at average odds of around 1.67, which is going to be minus 149 for an implied probability of 60%. If we take a look at the odds on Gaethje, he is the underdog at average odds of about 2.25, which is going to be plus 125 for an implied probability of 44%. So this matchup is really interesting because before I started to research it, I didn't really have an opinion on it. Well, in fact, I did. My opinion was both these guys are very dangerous. They're extremely good. They're well-rounded. They're two of the best fighters in the history of the lightweight division. It's going to be a very difficult fight to call because of how well-matched they are. And I honestly didn't think that I would be betting this fight. Then, on Monday, when I researched this fight, I actually live-streamed my research for this matchup. If you go to my If you go to my YouTube page, go to the live tab, you can see we did a 2.5 hour research session on this fight. And during the research session, I was quite surprised at how much I ended up leaning towards Justin Gaethje. It certainly wasn't what I was expecting. If you're really interested in betting this fight and you kind of want to understand the reasons why I came to the position I'm in when it comes to Gaethje, I definitely recommend watching that fight research live stream because it will make a lot more sense when you can see things with your own eyes. Obviously in this video I'm just summarizing the research that I've already done. I also want to say a massive thank you to everyone that was in that fight research live stream, because a lot of you in the live chat brought up a lot of things that I hadn't thought about, wouldn't have thought about, which made me think in like a way deeper, way like a much bigger level of detail than I probably otherwise would have. So I really appreciate all of you in the live stream, and if you want me to do more of those live stream research sessions, let me know in the comments below because I had a lot of fun doing it. It was great. So what I'm going to do in this video, I'm going to do my best to summarize all the things that we discovered from that live stream. So let's start off with the tail of the tape and any X factors. So Poirier, 34 years old, 5'9" with a 73-inch reach, and Gaethje, 34 years old, 5'11" with a 70-inch reach. So we can see both guys roughly the same age, roughly the same size, in fact exactly the same age. So no major X factors there. There is an X factor that I want to come into a little bit later on, but it's not relevant to talk about it just yet. So I'm going around the houses because this is such a complex fight that I don't even know where to begin with it. First of all, I guess let's just get grappling out the way. Because in the live chat for the fight research session, a few people were saying that they think Dustin Poirier can use a grappling heavy game plan to beat Justin Gaethje this weekend. And I believe that they're feeling like that because obviously Poirier used some grappling against Conor McGregor to cause him problems. And we also saw Justin Gaethje struggle very badly on the ground against Khabib. From the research session, I think it's pretty clear that there's almost no chance of Dustin Poirier having success with grappling in this fight. Justin Gaethje has got a collegiate wrestling background. His takedown defense is very, very good. Dustin Poirier isn't the best offensive wrestler, and in actual fact, I think Gaethje might be the better MMA grappler out of the two. What we saw in the past fights, or the recent fights of both guys, is that Justin Gaethje's takedown defense is actually really good. It's difficult to grab a hold of him, take him down, even more difficult to hold him down. And Poirier's takedown defense and ground game is actually pretty bad. So if either of these guys were to have any success with grappling, I think it would be Gaethje. Having said that, Gaethje never tries to take his opponents down. It's very, very rare. He shot like one half-assed takedown attempt in his last fight against Rafael Fiziev. Didn't fully commit to it. But Gaethje very, 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 very rarely tries to take his opponents down, despite the fact that he's got a base in wrestling. So I wouldn't expect grappling to come into this matchup. Now, the next thing that I want to kind of go through is the first fight between Dustin Poirier and Justin Gaethje, because this kind of sets the scene for why I feel the odds are a little bit off here. Because obviously Dustin Poirier beat Justin Gaethje all the way back in 2018, and I think this is one of the main reasons why Poirier is the slight favourite in this fight, and one of the reasons why so many people are leaning towards Poirier to win. Because if you go back and watch that fight, Dustin Poirier absolutely dominates the first two rounds. He looks absolutely incredible, to the extent that Gaethje is essentially like a human punching bag for the first two rounds. He just literally stands in front of Dustin Poirier and just gets lit up for 10 minutes straight. Total domination. Poirier looks absolutely incredible. Then in the third round, Poirier starts to struggle quite badly because his volume drops a little bit as he starts to get a little bit tired, and Gaethje starts to inflict cumulative damage with his leg kicks. So Gaethje started throwing the odd leg kick in the first round, but Poirier was kind of just eating them, wasn't causing him a lot of problems. And then the cumulative damage from those leg kicks really started to take its toll on Poirier's mobility in the third round, to the extent that he couldn't move that well. His volume dipped. He had to switch stances to try and protect his lead leg. And you could see that Gaethje's leg kicks were causing him a lot of problems. Then, just as Poirier was like struggling, he was badly hurt, he was slowing down, and we were seeing a big momentum swing in Gaethje's favour in that third round, there was a foul towards the end of round 3. Poirier had a decent sized break for the foul to kind of recover a little bit. Then he had a minute to recover in between the third and fourth round. Then he came out and knocked Justin Gaethje out early in round 4. So it was one of those fights where Poirier looked absolutely amazing in the first 2 rounds, but there was a definite momentum swing in Gaethje's favour in round 3, and just as that momentum swing came, Poirier got the quick finish, knocked Gaethje out. Now, that fight's very interesting because you can look at it in 2 ways. You can look at it in the sense that Poirier dominated the majority of the fight and knocked Gaethje out, or you can look at it and you can say, well, momentum was swinging in favour of Gaethje, and if that foul hadn't have occurred at the end of round 3, Gaethje was in a strong position to win the 3rd, 4th and 5th round, backdoor a decision because of how much Poirier was struggling with his leg. But taking all that into account, if the same 2 guys showed up on Saturday night, right? If the exact same versions of Gaethje and Poirier that we got back in 2018 showed up this weekend at UFC 291, I definitely wouldn't be betting Gaethje here. The main reason why I'm betting Gaethje is because I think Poirier has got a lot worse than 2018, and I think Gaethje's got a lot better. And of course, in the fight research session that we did for 2.5 hours, there was strong evidence to back that up. This isn't just an opinion that I'm tossing out into the universe that has come from hazy memories and things I've made up. Like, this is stuff we've seen in the footage, and I'm going to do my best to show you some short clips in this breakdown video of what I mean for those of you that don't have time to go and watch or the full-length fight research video, or of course do your own fight research. That's what I'm here for, right, to summarize things for you. But I know some people are going to be like, oh man, how the fuck can you bet Gaethje? He's already lost to Poirier. It's like, yeah, but it's 5 years ago. And something that's really, really, really notable to me is that Poirier's had almost 40 pro fights. You know, both guys have been in a lot of wars. Both guys have taken a lot of damage. Both guys have had a lot of injuries. And both guys, you know, have been consistently competing against the best lightweights in the world for the vast majority of their career. So they reach the highest level of anything in life. So we've got to be on a journey of continuous self-improvement. And so you'd be crazy to expect both Poirier and Gaethje to perform the same in 2023 that they did 5 years ago in 2018, when they were both in their late 20s and both in their physical and athletic prime, which doesn't make sense. And there will be some people that will say, oh, well, you know, Poirier will have the mental edge coming into this fight because he's already beaten Justin Gaethje. And that could be true. You know, Gaethje could definitely be intimidated by the fact that Poirier's already beat him. Poirier can take an enormous amount of confidence knowing he's already beaten Gaethje coming in this weekend. However, I feel those points are negated by the fact that it could also give Justin Gaethje a lift, light a fire underneath him, put a chip on his shoulder. You know, how often when fighters lose a fight do we hear them say in interviews that they just want to get that loss back? They do anything to fight that guy again because they want to prove everyone, you know, that everyone, they want to prove to everyone they can beat that guy, right? Fighters talk about their losses way more than they talk about their wins because it's what fuels them, it's what drives them, it's what haunts them. And losses are often what really force us to get better and improve. You know, some of my darkest periods betting on sports is where I've made the biggest improvements because you're forced to go deep, analyze everything that you've done, make changes and improve. So, you know, yes, Poirier winning the first fight might work in his favour, but it might also give Gaethje that extra lift. And you know, at the same time, while Poirier may feel more confident knowing that he's beaten this guy before, he may also get a little bit complacent because maybe he feels he's superior to Gaethje. And, you know, there's lots of angles, there's lots of ways to look at it. So, yeah, ultimately what I'm trying to say is I don't put too much weight on their fight from back in 2018 because I don't believe they're the same guys coming in. And at the same time, I feel that, you know, the mental aspect can be argued for either guy, to favour either guy, depending on what your opinion is, what your perspective, and really there's no way to know. So for me, they kind of negate one another. So now if we look at how they match up from a stylistic point of view, what I'm going to do is talk about the version of both guys that exist in 2023 and what I expect to see from them this weekend at UFC 291. And from there, what I'm going to do is reference back to the differences from recent performances of both guys to what we've seen from them when they fought one another in 2018. And I'm going to show you some clips to highlight that I don't think the Dustin... Ultimately, what I'm trying to say is I think the version of Gaethje that exists in 2023 is better than the version of Gaethje that existed in 2018 when he last fought Poirier. And I think the version of Poirier that exists in 2023 is worse than the version of Poirier that existed when they last fought in 2018. Show you some video clips to back that up. Why am I going a little bit blurry? Let's correct that. Please, can we correct that, universe? Sorry, guys. There we go. We're sharp again. Brilliant. Brilliant, brilliant, brilliant. Okay, right. So let's talk about how they match up stylistically in 2023. Let's do that. So, obviously we've spoken about this most likely being a stand-up fight. You never know what's going to happen in MMA, but based on past performances, very, very likely that this will be a stand-up fight. One thing that's very notable to me notable when it comes to Justin Gaethje is that I believe his last fight against Rafael Fiziev give us strong clues to suggest that he has evolved tremendously as a fighter. Earlier in Justin Gaethje's career, he would kind of just walk forward, block punches with his face, put loads of pressure on his opponents, and just look to break him with his chin and toughness. His striking defense wasn't particularly good. He had a tendency to gas out as fights wear on, and for the most part he relied on being a human punching bag until his opponents were too tired to punch him and then momentum would swing in his favour, which is kind of how the Poirier fight was going. Then, when Gaethje started to train with Trevor Whitman, his boxing started to improve exponentially. His striking defense was a lot better. His footwork and movement became exponentially better. And Gaethje, as a package, just became a way more thoughtful, intelligent, strategic fighter. Whereas up until the point where he started training with Trevor Whitman, for the most part, he was just a berserker. Now, from time to time, that berserker style does come out in him, and you do see him get into big exchanges, and we've seen that in his fights against both Michael Chandler and Charles Oliveira in Gaethje's recent history. But after his loss to Charles Oliveira, in a fight where ultimately he went toe-to-toe, got knocked out, and it cost him the belt, he's spoken a lot about coming to terms with the fact that his kill or be killed fighting style, where he gets into these big exchanges and puts himself into so much danger, is unsustainable, and how he knows he can't afford to continue getting into these wars and taking the kind of damage that he's been taking. And so when you go watch the Fiziev fight, you very much see this. You see a much more mature Justin Gaethje, in the sense that every time Fiziev were to come forward and attack Gaethje, instead of Gaethje standing his ground and playing rock'em sock'em robots like he did against Michael Chandler, Charles Oliveira, and incidentally Dustin Poirier in their first fight, he would kind of cover up behind the high boxing guard, back up, circle away, and then take the fight back to boxing range, where he could get his jab going and, you know, actually use technique to best Fiziev. And this is a definite shift in Gaethje's mentality, where in the past it would almost be like he would refuse to take a backward step. He wouldn't want to give his opponent an inch psychologically, so he would stand his ground and fire back, and invariably that would result in him taking a lot of damage and from time to time getting caught with a big shot and knocked out, which is what happened against Charles Oliveira. Now, if Gaethje has completely changed his approach to fighting from a strategic point of view, which again is an assumption on my part, we can't absolutely for certain be sure, but when you listen to what he said in interviews and then you look at his approach to the Fiziev fight, that certainly seems to be what is happening. If Gaethje comes in this weekend, fights safer, fights smarter, avoids getting into any big exchanges with Poirier, then I think Dustin Poirier is in a world of trouble. I think he really, really is in a lot of trouble, because based on past performances, Gaethje has got significantly better striking defense than Dustin Poirier. He has much faster hand speed, and he doesn't slow down as early in fights as Dustin Poirier does, which is interesting because in the past Gaethje was the one more likely to slow down and Poirier had the better cardio. But remember, like I say, Poirier's had a lot of fights now. Gaethje has as well, but there is some evidence in recent fights that Poirier may be on a little bit of a decline. More so than Gaethje. I feel Gaethje is still improving, whereas Poirier is at the very least plateaued, and I'm pretty certain actually he's declining from footage that I can show you. So this is one of those matchups where it's very, very likely to be a stand-up fight, and there's a lot of reasons to favour Gaethje in a stand-up fight. For example, he's faster than Poirier. He's got better footwork and movement. His striking defense is better. On top of that, this fight is also taking place at Salt Lake City, which is at high altitude. We know Justin Gaethje has fought at high altitude before. We also know he lives and trains in Denver, Colorado, has for a really long time. So Gaethje actually trains at high altitude. So fighting in the high altitude climate of Salt Lake City isn't likely to have as big of an impact on Justin Gaethje as it's likely to have on Dustin Poirier. Now I know Poirier will be doing some things to prepare for the high altitude, like sleeping in a high altitude chamber, this kind of thing, but it's not the same as living, breathing, training in high altitude for years and years and years. So it definitely gives Gaethje an edge. No matter what fighters do to prepare for training at high altitude, it always takes its toll on them. But it's far less likely to have a significant effect on Gaethje because he's used to it. Another reason why I like Gaethje in this fight is that Poirier stands very, very heavy on his lead leg. Extremely heavy. Now, this wasn't always the case. In the past, Poirier would use a lot of footwork and movement, but over the last few years, Poirier has become significantly more flat-footed. So these days, he stands heavier on his lead leg than ever before. The leg kicks are one of Justin Gaethje's biggest weapons. He can throw them with an insane amount of impact, land them extremely hard, but with virtually no telegraph at all. They're very, very difficult to read. So for someone like Dustin Poirier, who's not the fastest and stands as heavy as he does on the lead leg, it's going to be very, very difficult for him to address or to actually deal with Justin Gaethje's leg kicks. And we have absolute confirmation that Gaethje is going to be able to cause Poirier problems with his leg kicks, because when they fought back in 2018, we saw, Poirier was really struggling in that third round. If you just go back and watch round 3 of that fight from back in 2018, Poirier was in a lot of trouble from those leg kicks. So much trouble, in fact, that he actually had to have a hip surgery because of the damage sustained in the Justin Gaethje fight. I can't remember who shared this with me. I think it was, I'm pretty sure it was Brett in my Discord community. Not 100%. If it was someone else, I really appreciate you for sending this to me. But yeah, basically, when you watch the third round of Gaethje versus Poirier from back in 2018, Gaethje was hammering Poirier's lead leg with such impact that his leg was literally like fucking swinging out from underneath him. And I think because of that, he suffered tears in his hip, which meant that he had to have surgery to correct that issue. And I believe this is probably one of the reasons why Poirier is a lot more flat-footed now than he used to be. His mobility just isn't anywhere near as good as it was back in 2018. And I'm going to show you some evidence of this in just a moment. So yeah, when I look at this fight, it's one of those fights where I'm not going to be betting huge on Justin Gaethje, because these are two elite fighters. Anything can happen in a fight like this. Both of them can dig deep. They're both tough as nails. They're both extremely dangerous. They both have an incredible will to win. And we see a lot more crazy stuff happen on big pay-per-views. Having said that, when you weigh everything up, Gaethje has far more paths to victory in this fight than Dustin Poirier does. And the cherry on top of the cake is he's also the underdog. So you're getting a really good risk to reward ratio in the odds. So now what I need to do is obviously show you guys a little bit of evidence as to the as to the difference in mobility that we've been speaking about. So what we need to do is find the first fight between these two from 2018. Here we go. Here it is. And let's go to the first round. Okay. So what I want you guys to pay attention to is the footwork and movement of Dustin Poirier. So what you will notice in this fight is that he's always moving. His footwork, his movement is absolutely excellent. And like I say, I don't want to make this breakdown video too long. We've already done a 2.5 hour live stream on this fight, you know, which you can go watch if you want to see what I'm talking about in more detail. But just look at the footwork and the movement of Poirier, and you can already see Gaethje go to the leg kicks early in this first round. So you can see lots of footwork, lots of movement, side to side movement. You know, he's moving back to slip shots. He's springing forward to attack Gaethje. He's moving his head a lot. He's just very, very mobile. Lots of footwork, lots of movement from Dustin Poirier. And what you can see from the most part from Gaethje is just plodding forward, very flat-footed, slow hand speed, blocking punches with his face. Now, I'm not going to show you footage of how much Gaethje's hand speed, technique, defense has improved in this video, or the breakdown is going to turn out to be really long. But if you're interested, go check out that 2.5 hour live stream. You can see it for yourself just by following the video footage that we watched together within that stream. Gaethje is a lot better in 2023 than he was in 2018. But we'll just spend 2-3 minutes here. I just want you to pay attention to the volume of Poirier, the footwork and the movement. Notice how light he is on his feet. He's bouncing around, making himself a moving target. You know, very light footwork, very good movement. Look, he's light on his toes. Light on his toes, look, just dancing around, good footwork, good movement, very light on his toes, lots of mobility. Maybe we'll give it another minute and then we'll move on and we'll look at one of Poirier's recent fights to see the contrast in his mobility these days. So there you go, circling away, light on his feet. Another minute, light on his feet. Like I say, if you like these breakdown videos, guys, please hit the like button below. Subscribe if you haven't already. It would mean a lot to me just to push these videos out to more people. That hopefully grows my audience and helps them out when they don't have time to research fights themselves. And also, if you are watching on YouTube, don't forget that if you really like these breakdown videos and you want to watch breakdown videos for all the prelim fights on this card, head on over to my website, MMABettingTips.com. On my website, I post all my bets on there, as well as breakdown videos for every single fight on every single UFC card, not just the prelims. So, not just the main card, sorry, so check it out. So yeah, lots of footwork, lots of movement from Poirier. Now, what you can do is basically pick any of Poirier's fights from the last 2 years to see a completely different version of him. It doesn't matter which one you pick. So on the live stream, we watched the Charles Oliveira and Michael Chandler fight. So what I'm going to do in this video is show you footage of his fight against Conor McGregor, because we didn't watch it on stream. So you'll kind of see that not only does he look incredibly flat-footed in the fights against Chandler and Oliveira, but he also looks very flat-footed here against Conor. So as you can see, this is halfway through round 1, and the reason why I'm choosing to pick up from here is, as you can see, there's a lot of grappling up until the midway point of the round. So the second half of round 1 is where you start to see Poirier's footwork and movement. I don't want to leave it later in the fight because then he'll start to get a little bit tired. I want to show you his footwork and movement from pretty much the same stage in the fight that we just watched in that matchup from back in 2018 between Poirier and Gaethje. So here we go. So they're going to disengage from this clinch position in just a second. What I want you guys to pay attention to is the footwork and the movement of Poirier. How much more flat-footed he is. How much his mobility has been affected since that hip surgery. And how he is just nowhere near as fluid as he was back in 2018. Just doesn't move anywhere near as well. So I'm going to disengage any second. Here we go. Now just want you to pay attention to the footwork, the movement of Poirier, and how slow he looks. So very, very flat-footed, right? Bounces around on the spot. But notice when he first fought Gaethje, he was on his toes. He was light on his feet. He was bouncing around. When Gaethje would come forward to attack him, he would be very light on his feet so he could move backward. When he would come forward and attack, he would spring forward light on his feet, and he would use a lot of lateral movement. Look at how much more flat-footed Poirier is here. And of course there's a little bit of footwork and movement, but look at the difference in the position of his feet and his movement here compared to the fight back in 2018 against Gaethje. He's not the same guy, way more flat-footed now. And what that means is he's much easier to attack. Look at how heavy he is on his lead leg. Remember how much damage Gaethje was able to inflict on Poirier with those leg kicks back when Poirier's footwork and mobility was very good. Imagine how much more success imagine how much more success Gaethje's going to have with his leg kicking game now in 2023 when Poirier is flat-footed and a static target such as this. On top of that, because Poirier's hand speed is much slower than Justin Gaethje's, and because he doesn't move as well, it's going to be far easier for Gaethje to have success in boxing range in 2023 than it was in 2018, because Poirier is way easier to hit these days just because he doesn't move as much. You can see it here. He stood right in front of Conor. And again, I don't want to make this breakdown video any longer than it needed to be. For the naysayers, I will also just put the cherry on top of the cake, and we'll watch a little bit of footage from the Chandler fight as well. We could watch the Oliveira fight, the Chandler fight. It doesn't really matter. I think the Chandler fight illustrates it better, only because in the Oliveira fight, Oliveira put a lot of pressure on Poirier early, and there was a sense that he was overwhelmed, which can, of course, improve your footwork and movement. Obviously, he was under a lot of pressure against Chandler as well, but just not quite as much as he was against Oliveira. So again, this is right at the beginning of round one. Just want you to pay attention to how flat Poirier's footwork and movement is compared to how light he was on his feet in that fight back in 2018. Again, I like to cross the T's, dot the I's, because whenever I lose a bet, that I share with people on YouTube, that people love to bring it up in the comments for weeks. It's funny how they never mention the winners, which is actually hilarious because we've only had one losing month in the whole of 2023. But I like to just give you guys all the detail, all the information, so you can make up your own mind, right? Like I say, this isn't a fight where I'm going to sell my car, my house, my sister, and bet it on Justin Gaethje. This fight can go either way. However, I do think when you look at where both guys are at in 2023, this stage in their career, I think Gaethje at underdog odds is a pretty good bet. So you can see Chandler's taking advantage of the fact that Poirier stands very heavy on that lead leg as well. He's attacking the legs. And of course, we can't ignore the fact that Poirier had a lot of success with his leg kicks against Conor McGregor, right? It's one of the main reasons why he beat Conor McGregor. But Gaethje, for me, has by far the more dangerous leg kicks, in my opinion. And he's already caused Poirier tons of trouble with them. You can just see in positions like this how much easier it is to trap Poirier against the cage in positions such as this. When he fought Gaethje back in 2018, when Gaethje would pressure him up against the cage like this, he would just circle away from Gaethje. But because he doesn't have the mobility now, he's much more flat-footed. He kind of has to stand his ground and then finds himself in awkward positions like that, where he's at risk of being knocked out. So you can kind of just see it here. Poirier's mobility just not as good, and I feel probably made my point by now, just much more flat-footed. So yeah, do your own research. Let me know what you think in the comments below. And yeah, don't go too big on Gaethje because it's an amazing fight that could go either way. But at underdog odds, sign me up. I think there are a lot more reasons to like Gaethje in this fight than there are to like Poirier. So for me, You know, this is one of those fights where you've either got to pass, which I totally understand because both these guys are extremely good. It's a fight that could go either way. If you don't want to pass, if you really, really, really want to bet this fight, for me, you've got to take Gaethje. So in terms of the over-under on this one, obviously both guys are tough as nails. And what we know about fights that take place at high altitude is that they are more likely to go deeper than they would if they were taking place without the altitude being a factor. This is because fighters, well, there's two reasons why fights at high altitude tend to last longer than you'd otherwise expect. The first reason being fighters are very aware of the fact that they're fighting at high altitude. So they don't want to go hard early and risk burning themselves out. For this reason, they tend to pace themselves better. As a result, fights tend to last longer because fighters will be a little bit more strategic, a little bit more cautious with their output. Another reason why fights at high altitude tend to last longer than usual is because guys just get tired way sooner. So when they're tired, they're hot, they're sweaty. A submission is less likely because they can slip out of positions on the ground easier when both guys are sweaty. On top of that, they might not have the energy to complete a submission. If they get a guillotine, something like that, they might not be able to generate enough squeeze to submit their opponent. Another reason is, obviously, you know, if you get tired earlier in the fight than usual and your arms are heavy and tired, it's harder for you to land, you know, big knockout power. So for that reason on this card, I would be looking more at playing overs. Obviously, both these guys are very dangerous. They've both got big knockout power. So it is a tricky one. The over-under is a tricky one. Yeah, very, very tricky. I would probably... I'm definitely not going to be betting the over. I'm probably not going to be betting the over. I'm definitely not going to be betting the over-under on this one. If you did... I think the best bet to go for would be fight doesn't go to a decision. I'm quite surprised the odds are that good. I would bet on fight doesn't go to a decision, even though I've literally just said fights at high altitude are more likely to go deep. The reason why I would bet on fight doesn't go to a decision is because both guys do have a history of slowing down. Both guys are very aggressive. Both guys are very good at going for the kill when they sense their opponent is hurt. Both have legit knockout power. And I just think both guys are so dangerous that the probability of both of them making it 25 minutes without getting finished is quite unlikely. So I do like fight doesn't go to a decision because it's going to be a war. In fact, I might bet that. In fact, I might. I won't rule it out. I thought the odds would be steeper than this, so I do quite like that actually. In terms of props on this one, I do feel the most likely outcome is Gaethje to win by knockout or TKO, but I don't like the odds. They're a little bit short, but I do think that's the most likely outcome. The reason why I don't love the odds is because they're not that much better. They're only like 30% better than Gaethje's moneyline odds, which is why I don't absolutely love them. So yeah, man, not keen on that, but hope you found that useful. Let me know what you think in the comments below. That was a long one. Now let's break down the next fight, which is the co-main event between Jan Blachowicz and Alex Pereira. So if we start off by taking a look at the odds on this one, we can see that Blachowicz is the favourite at average odds of around 1.83, which is going to be minus 120 for an implied probability of 55%. If we take a look at the odds on Alex Pereira, he is around an average of 2.0, which is going to be plus 100 for an implied probability of 50%. So Pereira, 36 years old, 6'4", with an 80-inch reach. Jan Blachowicz, 40 years old, 6'2", with a 78-inch reach. So both guys roughly the same age, roughly the same size. No notable X factors there. However, I do think Blachowicz is at that stage in his career where you would expect Father Time at some point in the near future to be hitting him pretty hard. He's 40 years old. He's had 40 pro fights, almost 40 pro fights. He's just got a lot of miles on the clock. You know, there aren't many 40-year-olds competing at the highest level of MMA for a reason. This is a young man's game. And while every once in a while a unicorn comes along like Blachowicz or Daniel Cormier, ultimately Father Time is undefeated. And with that being said, Blachowicz is at that stage in his career where I feel it is dangerous to bet on him. Now, I know Pereira is also no spring chicken. He's 36 years old. He's only had 9 pro fights, but he's probably had tons and tons of kickboxing fights. So he's also at the stage in his career where he'd be declining. However, there is a big difference between, you know, a 36-year-old light heavyweight and a 40-year-old light heavyweight. We know, you know, in your late 30s, you can start to decline very rapidly. So on paper, 4 years might not look like a big difference in age, but in fight miles, Pereira is likely a lot younger than Blachowicz, and that does give him an edge in this fight. Now, this is one of those matchups which comes along every once in a while that I just don't really have a particularly strong opinion on. And the main reason is because both guys are relatively inactive in terms of the volume they put out. And that makes it really difficult to feel confident on either guy. If we just quickly address the grappling, because obviously, you know, we could see some grappling in this fight, but with both guys being strikers, you know, you would expect this for the most part to be a stand-up fight. But if we just consider grappling for a minute, when it comes to grappling, this one is a tricky one because both guys are pretty bad on the ground. I know there will be a lot of people who will look to the Israel Adesanya fight and remember Blachowicz using a grappling heavy game plan to win that. It's kind of justification for betting Jan Blachowicz this weekend on the basis that even if Pereira had an advantage on the feet or they were relatively well matched on the feet, Blachowicz's grappling could be the difference between the two. The problem that I have with that is that Blachowicz isn't a particularly good grappler. And on top of that, Blachowicz is also the kind of guy that gasses extremely quickly if you force him to just grapple a little bit. He doesn't have grappler's cardio. And one of the reasons why his output is quite low on the feet is because he knows he slows down a lot as fights wear on. So he manages his output. You know, all that power comes at a cost. Yes, Blachowicz hits very hard, but because he hits so hard, he drains the gas tank very quickly. So he's got to be very economical with his output. This is why, if you think back to when Blachowicz fought Adesanya, Blachowicz didn't even start trying to grapple until the 3rd round of a 5-round fight, because he didn't want to risk burning himself out early and then not having the energy to compete with Izzy in the 3rd, 4th and 5th rounds. So Blachowicz probably will use grappling at some point in this fight, but I'd be very surprised if he used it early on, because he's not going to want to risk exerting energy trying to get the fight to the ground in round 1, win round 1 with grappling, and then be in a position where he's too tired to stand and strike with Pereira into rounds 2 and 3. And I know Pereira slows as well as fights wear on. He's got pretty low output for the exact same reason as Blachowicz, right? Pereira's power also comes at a cost. All I'm saying is if both guys get tired, it might be easier for Pereira to neutralise the threat of Blachowicz's wrestling than it would be for Blachowicz to get Pereira down, because generally it takes a lot more energy to get a takedown than to defend a takedown. And Blachowicz's offensive wrestling isn't the best, and Alex Pereira's takedown offense, to be fair to him, isn't the worst. And with him training every day with guys like Glover, he's going to be making big improvements from fight to fight, and we have seen that. So this is one of those matchups where, based on past performances, Blachowicz will have the advantage on the ground, but that's if he can get Pereira down and hold him down from top position. I don't think that's going to be really, really easy to do. It can happen for sure. Blachowicz can do it, but he's going to need to be very careful because he doesn't want to risk burning himself out in the process and then getting knocked out on the feet. So just bear all that in mind. Like, I'm not betting this fight. It's too complicated for me. I can't work it out. But just if you're banking on Blachowicz having loads of success with his grappling in this matchup, just be a bit careful. I don't think it's as simple as that. We need to focus it back up. There we go. Okay, so in terms of how these two match up when it comes to striking. Oh, also, guys, completely forgot. Just to put that final point on the grappling. Also, this fight is at high altitude. We know both guys have got a history of slowing down, right? So that could make it even harder for Blachowicz to use his grapplings. If he slows down grappling at sea level, imagine how fast he's going to get tired trying to grapple at high altitude. So that might be another reason why Blachowicz chooses not to grapple. But obviously both these guys are predominantly strikers, so you'd expect this to be a stand-up fight. That's why I'm finding it very difficult to predict the outcome of this one. Or at least attempt to predict the outcome of this one, right? No one can predict exactly what's going to happen. But yeah, it's a tricky fight because both guys have devastating one-shot knockout power. But both guys are very low-volume strikers. They don't really throw a lot. And that's because, obviously, they don't want to risk burning themselves out. The power comes at a cost. So what's tricky about this fight is, if you look at our recent bets, if we go to our recent bets, we obviously bet Israel Adesanya to beat Alex Pereira, right? Where is it? Yeah, if we go to page 2, if you go back and watch the breakdown video I made for the Pereira versus Izzy fight, we bet on Izzy. And the reason we bet on Izzy was because Pereira throws such a low volume that we knew if... Sorry, you can't even see that. My face is blocking it. We knew that if Pereira didn't get a win inside the distance, because he threw such a low volume of strikes, it would be very, very unlikely that he would win a decision. It's like Chael Sonnen said, when you try to win a fight by knockout, you often end up losing a decision, because in between you landing those big, heavy, singular knockout power punches, you're giving your opponent to rack up a lot of volume. So the problem with this fight is you've got two guys with crazy power, and they know it. And so there's two things I think you're very likely to see in this matchup. You're likely to see neither guy doing very much because they're going to want to conserve energy and they're both going to be trying to land that perfect shot. The second thing you're going to be seeing from these two is I think they're going to show one another a lot of respect, because I think they're going to know the threat that the other poses to them. So this fight reminds me in many ways of Derek Lewis versus Francis Ngannou many, many years ago, where you had the two biggest power punches in the division and everyone was expecting like this crazy exciting fight with the two most dangerous guys in the division. What actually ended up happening was that both guys recognized the threat that the other posed to them, and we had a 15-minute staring contest where not a lot happened. I would be very concerned about that happening here, because typically speaking, neither of these guys do very much, and they just look for that perfect shot that's going to put you away. And because of that, you could end up with a bit of a stalemate here, where they both just respect each other a lot, and that makes for a very difficult fight to predict, because if it does play out like that, it's likely to be one of those close, sweaty matchups where someone wins a controversial split decision. Now, my lean on this fight is definitely Blachowicz, because he does throw more volume than Pereira. He also does have an edge when it comes to grappling. So I do lean towards Blachowicz in this fight. I wouldn't bet Blachowicz though, because he's really old at 40 years old. No disrespect, Jan, you look phenomenal for your age. I'm 38, bro. You're an absolute stallion. But 40 years old is pretty old, you know, to be competing at the highest level of mixed martial arts. On top of that, Pereira is faster in my opinion, better defensively and more technical than Blachowicz. But those advantages don't mean a whole lot if you're not going to throw very much. If you go back and watch Pereira's 2 fights against Izzy, barely threw anything. And so, yeah, it is one of those situations where I slightly lean Blachowicz, but yeah, I think we're likely to get a really close, cagey fight here, and it's a very difficult one to predict. So what does that mean for the over-under on this fight? Well, I do really like over 2.5 rounds, which again sounds absolutely crazy, right? Because when you've got two of the biggest hitters in the division, betting on an over seems madness. However, like we've already said, fights that take place at high altitude are more likely to go deep. Both these guys have slowed down in the past, so they may start slower in round 1 for fear of burning themselves out and gassing themselves out at high altitude. On top of that, we could get a fight where both guys show each other a lot of respect, and they're really cautious. They don't open up very much. They don't commit very hard to their shots, and we get like a close, cagey fight that goes the distance. So I do quite like the over 1.5 rounds. I'm not sure if I'm going to be betting it myself yet, but it is interesting to me. You know, if we look at the records of both guys, you know, yes, they both hit very hard, but if we just look at the numbers, you know, Pereira's fight against Bruno Silva lasted longer than 1.5 rounds. So did his 2 fights against Izzy. So 3 of his last 4 would have lasted longer than 1.5 rounds. If we look at Blachowicz's record, we can see that this went longer than 1.5. This went longer than 1.5. This went longer than 1.5. So did this. So did this. So did this. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 of Blachowicz's last 7 have lasted 1.5 rounds. So again, both guys hit very hard. This fight could absolutely end in 40 seconds with a huge highlight reel knockout. However, both guys tend to slow, so they might be more likely to pace themselves, and they might show each other a lot of respect in this one. Quite often when you get 2 big hitters, they don't like to go toe-to-toe for fear of ending up on the other guy's highlight reel. They show each other a lot of respect. So in terms of the prop bets on this one, I don't really like any. If you're the type of guy that wants to bet a little bit of money just to make watching the fight more interesting, maybe go Blachowicz by decision, but the odds aren't great. I don't love it, and Pereira can definitely cause him problems. This is one of those fights I'm actually having a lot of problem with, so I can understand why it's in the even money odds range, because I just don't feel too confident either way. Let me know in the comments what you think, because yeah, I don't really have a strong feeling on this one. But I hope you found that useful. I do have a strong feeling on this next fight. So let's break down the matchup between Stephen Thompson and Michel Pereira. So if we start off by taking a look at the odds, we can see that Thompson is the favourite at average odds of around 1.65, which is going to be minus 154 for an implied probability of 61%. If we take a look at the odds on Michel Pereira, he is around an average of, say, 2.25, which is going to be plus 125 for an implied probability of 44%. So Stephen Thompson is 40 years old, 6 foot tall, with a 75-inch reach, and Michel Pereira is 29 years old, 6 foot 1, with a 73-inch reach. So we can see both guys roughly the same size. However, there is a big difference in age, with Michel Pereira being 11 years younger than Stephen Thompson. And we know statistically the younger fighter wins around 70% of the time when there's an 11-year age gap in a fight. So that statistic heavily favouring Michel Pereira here. And if you just blind bet that statistic over a long period of time, you'd obviously win 70% of your bets, and you would, you know, make a decent profit, I would imagine. So that is problematic. That is problematic because I think this is an amazing stylistic matchup for Stephen Thompson. And if Stephen Thompson was the same age as Michel Pereira, Thompson would be one of my biggest bets of the year, because I think he is levels above a great stylistic matchup for Stephen Thompson. However, we need to be very, very smart, and we need to understand that it's very dangerous to try and fight against strong trends. So I've spoken about this a bit in recent months, but if you look at our profitability chart on pre-fight bets, what you can see is this long period that lasts about a year of break even, right? And after this dip back in May 2022, I just came to the point where I was like, every time I have, a decent winning run like we've got here, I just give it all back. And I can't break this cycle where I'm just floating around break even. Even here, right, we grind up profits, then we give it all back. And I just didn't know why this kept happening. So what I did was I went back, analysed all my results from the previous year, not this period when we were obviously doing great, but the previous year when we hit this bad patch of break even. I was like, what the hell is going on? And what I found is that certain types of bets were consistently costing me money, and there were certain types of bets that I was performing very well on. So what would happen is I would have runs where I would make money on these certain kind of bets, and then I would have runs where I would lose money on other types of bets. And what I did a year ago, you can see here back in July 2022, was that I stopped betting the kind of bets that were costing me money, and I started doubling down and placing more of the bets that I was performing well on. And as you can see, over the last year, we've done extremely well. This is a beautiful uptrend to the extent that we've only had one losing month so far in the whole of 2023, which was February. So these changes that I made really had a huge impact on our pre-fight betting performance, and we've been doing great this year. So the problem with a fight like this is that while I think this is an incredible stylistic matchup for Stephen Thompson, betting on him is the exact kind of bet that has cost me money during this period here. So this is one of those situations where I have to look at Stephen Thompson and I need to just not bet him. I just need to pass. As much as I would like to bet Stephen Thompson here, I have to stick to the strategy that I know produces long-term profits, because this uptrend here is phenomenal. And if we keep this going, pre-fight betting will continue to be an absolute cash cow for us. And I'm really, really, optimistic, positive about the future of pre-fight betting, where with this new knowledge, we can avoid break-even periods such as this and go back to producing really strong uptrends and periods of profit like this and like this. So when I look at a fight like this, it's tricky, right? Because on one hand, in recent months, there's been situations where I've researched a fight like Jared Cannonier versus Marvin Vettori. And I've done these breakdown videos and I've said, look guys, this is an amazing stylistic matchup for Jared Cannonier. I think he's going to win. I think he's a nightmare for Vettori. But because Cannonier is 40 years old, I can't bet him. What happens? Cannonier goes out there, absolutely smokes Marvin Vettori and dominates. And then it's frustrating because you were going to bet on you were going to bet on Jared Cannonier, but because of that hard rule of not betting older fighters, you miss out on a win. But then there's other situations where it saves you, where we were saying, Josh Emmett as a big underdog against Ilia Topuria was a good value bet, or Holly Holm was a very, very tempting bet against Mayra Bueno Silva recently. And we passed on both Holly Holm and Josh Emmett because they were just old, right? Emmett in his late 30s, Holly Holm in her early 40s. And these were the kind of bets that in this period I probably would have bet. I probably would have rolled the dice on Emmett. I probably would have sprinkled a little bit on Holly Holm. Definitely would have bet Jared Cannonier. But if we would have won a bet on Cannonier and lost on Holly and Emmett, we would obviously have been at an overall loss. So it's one of those situations where you just got to be disciplined. And even in situations like this, where you are very, very tempted to bet someone, and the footage shows it's a very good stylistic matchup for them, time and time and time and time and time again, we see old fighters find ways to lose. And that's what makes it very difficult to bet Stephen Thompson. He's had over 50 pro kickboxing fights. He's had, 20 in the ballpark of 25 MMA fights. He's been rocked, he's been wobbled, he's been dropped multiple times. Suffered a lot of knee injuries. He's always breaking his hands. Yes, he's tough as nails. Yes, his cardio is great. Yes, he's a nightmare stylistic matchup for Michel Pereira. But Father Time is undefeated. And 40 years old is very old to be competing at the highest level of the UFC. So as much as I would love to bet Stephen Thompson in this fight, I just need to be disciplined, pass. And I know if I do that, we'll continue this very, very nice uptrend and continue to make money. Look at our last bet, our last 10 bets. Look at, this strategy is working really, really well for us. Our win rate on pre-fight betting is good these days. We're grinding out nice, steady, consistent profits. So we just need to continue doing it and stay on the right track. So I will go over now the reasons why I think Stephen Thompson is a good bet in this fight. Ultimately, it comes down to volume. Michel Pereira just doesn't really throw very much volume. He's more of a single shot sniper. He'll throw the odd big flashy spinning attack, or the odd big kick, or the odd big power punch. But he doesn't throw a lot of volume. He doesn't throw combinations. He's just quite a low volume striker. When you look at the footwork, the movement of Thompson, he's always working. He's always attacking. He's chipping away at you with jabs, chipping away at you with those sideways, those push kicks, those kicks to the lead leg, just chipping away at you, racking up volume. He's very, very difficult to outwork. Kevin Holland found that out in his last fight. Thompson was able to outwork a young, hungry bull like Kevin Holland, which is not an easy thing to do. So this is going to be a really difficult stylistic matchup for Michel Pereira, because what Pereira wants to do is bounce around on the outside, use a lot of footwork and movement, and then blitz forward with big explosive attacks like a big straight punch combination or a big spinning attack. But Thompson is so experienced, so skilled, so good at reading his opponents. It's going to be very, very difficult for Michel Pereira to have success with that style. On top of that, we know that Pereira does like to bounce around, use a lot of capoeira, use a lot of footwork, use a lot of movement in the octagon. And with this fight being at high altitude, obviously all that footwork and movement takes a lot of energy. We have seen Pereira slow in past fights. We do see him become more flat-footed as fights wear on. And so, I think the high altitude environment is going to hit Pereira a lot harder than it's going to hit Stephen Thompson, who's a cardio machine, can go hard for 5 rounds, let alone 3, still throw a really high volume of strikes. So I'm really, 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 really tempted to bet Stephen Thompson this weekend. This is an extremely reluctant bet, but we have seen him get rocked, wobbled, dropped many times in his career. And at 40 years old, his chin's not going to be getting any better. He's suffered a lot of injuries. I know that if we avoid betting on guys like Stephen Thompson, Holly Holm, Josh Emmett, Jared Cannonier, even though we'll miss a winner from time to time, over the long term, it'll help us keep this nice uptrend going. And so that's what we need to do at the end of the day. In terms of the over-under on this one, where are we? So I do think it's reasonably likely this fight goes to a decision, only because Thompson's more of a volume striker. Both guys are pretty tough, pretty durable. Pereira's good at making himself a moving target, and he's elusive. And of course, with the fight being at high altitude, the fight is more likely to go deep, because guys are likely to slow sooner into the fight, which makes it harder for them to deliver knockout power. So yeah, I do think this fight's more likely to go to the decision. I'm not going to be betting it, but if you do want to bet the over-under on this one, I would bet on fight goes to a decision. In terms of the props, the only one that I would consider is Thompson by decision. Just I think he's going to outwork and outstrike Pereira over 3 rounds. But the odds are absolutely terrible. So, I mean, I wouldn't bother if I were you. But I know a lot of people like props. But yeah, the odds are absolutely ridiculous. And let's focus this camera back up. Don't know why it keeps dropping out of focus. Very, very annoying. There we go. All right. Okay. So I hope you found that useful. Now let's break down the next fight on this card, which is going to be King Bobby Green against Tony Ferguson. So Bobby Green is the favourite at average odds of around 1.25, which is going to be minus 400 for an implied probability of 80%. If we take a look at the odds on Ferguson, he is around an average of 4.0, which is going to be plus 300 for an implied probability of 25%. So Ferguson is 39 years old, 5'11", with a 76.5-inch reach, and Bobby Green, 36 years old, 5'10", with a 71-inch reach. So both guys roughly the same size, but Ferguson does have a very nice 5-inch reach advantage over Green. And of course, on paper, not a particularly big difference in age, only 3 years. Both guys have also got a lot of fights. Bobby Green's actually got more fights than Ferguson. But obviously we know Ferguson is on a very steep decline at this stage in his career. Looks quite frail, looks quite physically weak, reflexes shot, striking not good, and it's a very bad stylistic matchup for him. There's no way to dress it up. In the case of Blachowicz and Stephen Thompson this week, we've been talking about how Father Time is undefeated and how, you know, you'd expect both those guys to be declining hard any day now. I mean, we've seen the effect that Father Time can have on a fighter in the case of Tony Ferguson, because it's undeniable the Father Time has hit him extremely hard in recent years. This is one of those matchups where I wouldn't rule out Tony Ferguson winning this, just because historically Bobby Green has been the kind of guy that, for whatever reason, just seems to make fights close. You know, Bobby Green has got really bad fight IQ, you know, really bad decision making. He's one of these guys that just has some kind of weird performance anxiety where he just fights to the level of his opponent. And so I wouldn't rule out something crazy happening in this fight, like Green doing the thing where he likes to showboat a lot and allow his opponent to punch him in the face while he kind of fucks around and tries to exercise his dominance by showboating to the extent he's pretending he can see everything coming and slip shots very easily. But that's a tough thing to bet on, because skill for skill, you know that at this stage in their careers, Bobby Green is significantly better than Tony Ferguson in every single aspect of MMA. Green is extremely difficult to take down, extremely difficult to hold down. So it's not like Ferguson's going to be able to use grappling in this fight. And then on the feet, Green's just a significantly better striker. His chin's better, his defense is better, his hand speed's faster, more impactfulness on his shots. Just, this is one of those fights where Green should win pretty easily, and I don't have a whole lot more to say. However, be careful if you're throwing him into parlays and things like that, because Bobby Green is not the kind of guy I would trust with my money. You know, like GSP said, fighting is 90% mental. And, you know, Green is a great example of that. If he had a brain in his prime, he probably would have been one of the best fighters in the world. But decision-making, fight IQ, strategy cost him time and time and time again. And with a guy like Bobby Green, you never know when it'll cost him, because he does weird things in fights, makes weird decisions, and is not very trustworthy, unfortunately. So obviously the odds make it a very difficult fight to bet on. Very little upside in betting Bobby Green as a big favourite with how bad his fight IQ is. But at the same time, for the same reason that I would not bet Stephen Thompson because of his age, or Blachowicz because of his age, I would not bet, you know, Tony Ferguson either. In terms of the over-under though, I do think there's a pretty good chance this fight goes to a decision, and I may bet this myself. Yes, Tony Ferguson is very frail, but he's still absolutely tough as nails with zero quit in him. And Bobby Green likes to fuck about and play with his food. Yes, a lot of recent Bobby Green fights have ended inside the distance, but prior to that, he absolutely was a decisionator. And Ferguson, again, you know, this one went to round 4. These two went to a decision. You know, this one went into round 5. I know Ferguson is very frail, bad defensively, but Green has never been the most dangerous guy, and he does like to play with his food. So I quite like the fight goes to a decision on this. If I were you, I would consider that. Maybe even the over 2.5 rounds. I would consider it if I were you. In terms of props, Bobby Green to win by decision is the most likely outcome, but the odds are absolutely terrible. So, you know, that's like, I wouldn't bet any prop other than that, unless the odds on Green to win by knockout TKO are crazy. They're not, they're awful. I definitely wouldn't bet that. Green likes to play with his food. Ferguson tough as nails. Yeah, Green by decision if you really want to bet a prop on this fight, but I will be passing personally. So I hope you found that useful. Now let's break down the final fight on this main card, which is going to be Michael Chiesa versus Kevin Holland. So if we start off by taking a look at the odds on this one, we can see that Kevin Holland is the slight favourite at odds of average odds of 1.68, which is going to be minus 147 for an implied probability of 60%. If we take a look at the odds on his opponent, Michael Chiesa, he is an average of around 2.25, which is going to be plus 125 for an implied probability of 44%. So Michael Chiesa is 35 years old, 6'1", with a 75.5-inch reach, and Kevin Holland is 30 years old, 6'3", with an 81-inch reach. So we can see Chiesa is 5 years older than Holland, which statistically gives him around, the 5-year age gap statistically gives Kevin Holland around a 65% chance of winning. So nothing huge, but an edge nonetheless. And Holland also has almost a 6-inch reach advantage over Michael Chiesa. So what I would say is, if you like money, you probably shouldn't bet this fight, because this is one of those matchups where both guys have extreme advantages in the area that the other is weak. And this is one of those fights where both guys can absolutely dominate their opponent in their area of expertise. So it's a really dangerous matchup, because based on really dangerous matchup to bet, because based on past performances, it's really difficult to gauge which guy is going to be able to keep the fight in his area of expertise the longest. Yeah, it's an absolute minefield for betting. Obviously a classic striker versus grappler matchup. Kevin Holland, the striker, if the fight stays standing, he will light Michael Chiesa up, dominate the fight, and it'll be an easy night's work for him. But if the fight goes to the ground, Michael Chiesa has crushing grappling control, and Kevin Holland is going to be in a lot of trouble. The problem with this fight from a betting point of view is that there is so many different ways that it could go. It's very difficult to nail down one linear, reasonably likely outcome which favours one of these guys. Because if we start off by just focusing on the grappling, this is probably the easiest thing to cover. We know, based on Kevin Holland's fights against guys like Chimaev or Marvin Vettori or Derek Brunson, that his takedown defense is absolutely non-existent. It is awful. It's really bad. And I think this is because with Kevin Holland having that long, lean frame, he's got very skinny legs, which makes it easy to upset his balance. So Holland's takedown defense is very bad. That's not to say it couldn't have improved, you know, since we last saw his takedown defense tested, predominantly in those Brunson and Vettori fights. But based on the footage we have of Holland, his takedown defense is absolutely awful. What's also concerning is that Holland is the kind of guy that if you do get him down, he's very easy to control. He doesn't do a particularly good job of working his way back up to his feet. His submission defense is pretty bad. and he's also very, very weak off his back. Now, Michael Chiesa isn't the best offensive wrestler, but he's one of these guys that just has crushing grappling control, just an abnormal ability to tie guys up in bad positions on the ground and just absolutely maul them. Chiesa's back takes are extremely slick. He's very, very dangerous on the ground. He's got a heavy top game. If Chiesa gets this fight to the ground, it will be utter domination. I know Sean Brady made Chiesa look bad on the ground, but Chiesa's a bit of a nightmare on the ground, and he's levels and levels and levels and levels above Kevin Holland. Where this fight gets interesting, though, is that Chiesa slows down a lot as fights wear on. So with other guys on the card, like Alex Pereira, Jan Blachowicz, Michel Pereira, where we've been saying those guys slow down, the reason why fighters such as Michael Chiesa and Blachowicz and Pereira and Michel Pereira slow down is because when you have an abundance of physicality in any area, be it grappling or striking, that usually comes at a cost. So you look at like Alex Pereira and Blachowicz. One of the reasons why they slow down so much as fights wear on is because they hit so fucking hard, right? There's always a trade-off. That power has to come at a cost. And it's the same with Chiesa. His grappling control is unbelievably strong. But the more he grapples, the faster he gets tired. Because that physically imposing grappling has to come at a cost. That makes this fight very interesting, because Holland has obviously got great footwork, great movement. He's very elusive. He's not easy to tie up. If you grab a hold of him, then you can drag him to the ground pretty easily. But it's not easy to initially grab hold of him. And what we've seen with Michael Chiesa is that when he gets tired, he becomes an absolute sitting duck on the feet. His offensive wrestling's awful. His striking defense is really bad. And Holland will light this guy up if he gasses. And remember, this fight is at high altitude, so it's more likely that Michael Chiesa will gas on a card like this, because obviously high altitude climates hit fighters with bad cardio extremely hard. So this is one of those really, really difficult stylistic matchups. This is one of those really difficult fights to bet, because both guys have got extreme advantages in the area that the other is weak. But what makes this fight extra difficult from a betting point of view is that Holland does have a tendency to give up cheap takedowns. So, for example, there were moments in the Vettori and Brunson fights where Brunson and Vettori started to slow down, and Holland started to do a pretty good job of defending the takedowns, and you would think, oh, here we go, we got a momentum swing in Holland's favour here. But then because his takedown defence is so bad, he would just give up a takedown out of nowhere, find himself on his back, getting dominated. So it's one of those situations where even though Chiesa is going to be in a lot of trouble if he starts to tire in this fight because of how many problems Holland can cause him on the feet, Holland isn't trustworthy enough that you can trust him to kind of not give up a cheap takedown and throw the fight away, late in the third round or something, when Chiesa tries to steal the round with a takedown. Even if Chiesa's absolutely exhausted, Holland is still the kind of guy that will give up a cheap takedown. So it's a very dangerous fight. It's a minefield for betting, and I really feel this is one of those matchups where no matter who you bet, you're putting your money in a lot of danger. If I had to bet this fight, if I absolutely had to bet this fight, gun to my head, I'm not going to, but if I absolutely had to, I would probably take Holland, just because I think there's a chance he's improved his takedown defense. Now he's in the welterweight division since the Vettori Brunson fights, and I do think the high altitude environment is going to wreak havoc on Chiesa, even though I think it's going to wreak havoc on Chiesa because Kevin Holland's a cardio machine, but there is no way I would bet a fight like this. When I place bets, win or lose, I want to overwhelmingly stack the odds in my favour. That's what we're doing with Gaethje this weekend. We've already described all the advantages Gaethje has in that fight. If you look at our pre-fight bets, win or lose, we're overwhelmingly stacking the odds in our favour, right? Moreno, a cardio machine, isn't going to be easy for Pantoja to outwork him over 5 rounds. He did. Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, it happened. MMA's a crazy sport, anything can happen. But Moreno was a pretty strong position for us to put our money. Ismagulov, excellent takedown offense, excellent ground game, very difficult to hold down. Grant Dawson slows as fights wear on. He improved a lot at ATT, dominated Ismagulov. It is what it is. Merry Christmas, Happy New Year. We lost the bet. It happens, it's MMA. Fakhretdinov, better cardio than Kevin Lee, significantly better grappler. He won easily. Randy Brown, significantly better than Wellington Turman everywhere. Even when Turman showed up and looked better than we expected at welterweight, the skill gap was still too big. Brown was able to get the job done. Aldana fights at a decent pace. Great cardio. All she had to do was follow the blueprint Juliana Pena wrote in order to beat Amanda Nunes. She didn't. She showed Nunes way too much respect. As a result, got dominated. It is what it is. It's MMA. Jazz Duvicius, significantly better grappler than Miranda Maverick. Absolutely dominated Miranda Maverick. Chase Hooper, significantly better grappler than Nick Fury. Better gas tank. Dominated Nick Fury. Tainara Lisboa, significantly better than Jessica Rose Clark in every single aspect of MMA. Pretty much dominated the fight. Belal Muhammad fights at a high pace. We know Gilbert Burns, similar to Pantoja, unlikely to be able to outwork someone like Belal Muhammad over 5 rounds. Belal got the job done for us. If you look at the next page, we can go on. This was a terrible bet. I regret it. Not going to talk about this one. Pudilova, significantly better than Jocelyn Edwards on the ground. I feel that was a bit of a robbery. Most people scored that fight for Pudilova. Pretty harsh to call that a loss. Algio, we knew better gas tank than TJ Brown. Difficult to take down, difficult to hold down. Better striker, bang, Algio got the job done. Pedro Munoz, better boxer than Chris Gutierrez. Significantly better grappler, bang. Munoz an underdog, give it to me all day, boom, we hit it. Holloway, better than Arnold Allen in every single aspect of MMA. He got the job done. Ion Cutelaba, significantly better than Tanner Boser in every single aspect of MMA. Bang, he got the job done. Justin Jacoby made pretty much the same mistake as Irene Aldana. When you're facing a fighter that slows down as fights wear on, whether it's Azamat Murzakanov or Amanda Nunes, you got to make them work hard early so they slow down sooner in the fight. Jacoby didn't. He made the same mistake as Irene Aldana, showed Murzakanov way too much respect, so by the time Murzakanov did slow, way later in the fight, too late for Jacoby to win a decision. Izzy, obviously, significantly better than Pereira, pretty much everywhere, and he got the job done. We knew that Pereira wouldn't be able to match Izzy's volume based on their first fight. Joe Pyfer, better than Meerschaert everywhere, got the job done for us. Lucas Alexander, better than Stephen Thompson everywhere, got the job done for us. So it's these kind of bets that enable us to put together a really nice uptrend like this, and it's these kind of bets that we need to keep fishing for, like the Justin Gaethjes this weekend. Anything can happen in MMA, but if you overwhelmingly stack the odds in your favour, over the long term you will make a profit. On fights like this, it ain't the one, because we can't say either guy has huge advantages over the other. We know if the fight goes to the ground, Holland is screwed. If the fight stays standing, Chiesa is screwed. Those aren't the kind of positions you want to be putting your money into. Look for positions such as these, where win or lose, you know your fighter's got a huge edge somewhere over your opponent, and you know that their opponent isn't that well positioned to exploit their weaknesses. So, hope you found that useful. If we take a look at the over-under on this one, where are we? Here we go. So we do know Kevin Holland has pretty bad fight IQ, pretty bad strategy and game planning. So similar with Bobby Green, I would like to bet on this fight not to go to a decision, because Chiesa slows down a lot. Holland's bad on the ground. Chiesa is a sitting duck on the feet. However, Holland, like Bobby Green, does have a habit of playing with his food. So for that reason, a little bit dangerous to bet on the fight to end inside the distance. But if you really, really want to bet the over on this one, I would not bet the over. If you want to bet the over-under, I wouldn't take the over, because Holland's submission defense is really bad, and Chiesa is going to be in a lot of trouble on the feet if he gasses here. So either bet fight doesn't go to a decision or pass. In terms of the prop bets, I quite like Kevin Holland to win in round 3. Odds are like 12.0 plus 1,100. Not particularly likely to win. It's a long shot prop. I'm probably not going to bet him myself. But it's one of those bets where you don't need to win many. You don't need to hit a particularly high win rate to bank a long-term profit. So I hope you found that breakdown useful. Thank you very much for watching. If you like this video, please hit the like button below. Check out my website, MMABettingTips.com. If you like these breakdown videos, you can find breakdowns of all the prelims over on my website, as well as gaining access to our Discord community, and getting to see all my UFC bets for every single UFC event. Check out live betting if you want as well. We make a profit almost every month. You'll love it. But that's about it, boys. Subscribe, like, all that good stuff. And yeah, have a great weekend. Hope you crush it. Hope you make loads of money at UFC 291. I'll see you next week. Nice one, guys. Bye.